In quick revision, today we are going to see about digestive system. All these are important points. You can do it for theory as well as for MCQs. Oral cavity leads to pharynx. We'll start from here, from the beginning, okay? This is nose. I'm going to draw nasal cavity, okay? This is the nasal cavity. Here you have lips. You have upper jaw, that is the maxilla and mandible. Here you have tongue. So this is the oral cavity. So maxilla, tongue and mandible. This forms the oral cavity. So this is the nasal cavity through which the air enters. I am shading it as green, okay? This is a nasal cavity. Now there is a bony structure called maxilla, otherwise you call it as hard palate, and the posterior you have soft palate. So this hard palate separates the nasal cavity and the oral cavity. Here you have mandible and you have tongue here. These are just representations in the diagram, okay? So this nasal cavity has a opening at the posterior end, that is the back end. You have an opening. So this air enters the nose and it has to pass through the nasal cavity and it enters the flows to the back side of the nose. Same way, the food which we take through the mouth is chewed here well and it enters the back side of the tongue, which you call as the throat region. So here the nasal cavity and the oral cavity has a common opening, which you call as throat or pharynx, okay? Throat or pharynx. The shaded portion is the nasal cavity, has a back end opening, and the oral cavity also has the opening at the back end, that is the posterior region. Posterior means back, okay? Posterior meaning back. Okay, so the food enters through the mouth and air enters through the nose. Both come and meet here at the common point called as throat or pharynx. In particular, you can call this as oropharynx, because under pharynx you have three regions: nasopharynx, oropharynx and laryngopharynx. From the name itself you can say the pharynx region, which is close to the nose, that is the nasal cavity, is the nasopharynx. Here near the oral cavity, the pharynx is called as oropharynx, and here at the neck close to the larynx, it is called as laryngopharynx. So first point, now I think it will be clear now. So the oral cavity leads to pharynx. Oral cavity leads to pharynx. Common passage for food and air is pharynx, that is oropharynx. Common passage for food and air is oropharynx or the throat. Third point, windpipe is known as trachea. Now what is the meaning of pharynx? It is a muscular structure it is a muscular tube-like structure. Now the pharynx extends downwards to the neck. Okay, it extends downwards to the neck. Here in the neck, two structures open in the pharynx. This is a muscular tube. You have nasopharynx, oropharynx, and now this muscular tube pharynx extends down to the neck region. Here in the pharynx, two structures open. Okay, the first is the trachea and the second is the esophagus. Now I will draw in different colors so that you can see. Just the green one represents the tracheal region. I have not drawn the rings. This is just for explanatory purpose, so I am just making it in green color. And the second opening is the esophagus. Okay, this is the esophagus tube which extends down through the chest region to the near the abdominal region. Okay. So the first one is the trachea. The second one is the esophagus. So this is the common passage. The pharynx is the common muscular structure into which two structures open. The first one is the trachea and second one the esophagus. Now you have to ask me, if we take food, suppose if it enters the trachea, what will happen? There will be asphyxia, that is the person cannot breathe. So there should be some structure which should prevent the entry of food into the trachea. Trachea goes to lungs, okay, you all know. Lungs is the respiratory organ. Only air can enter. If something else like foreign object enters or if we aspirate, it will result in asphyxiation, that is we cannot breathe. So food should enter the esophagus and air should enter the trachea. For this you have a gate-like structure that is called as epiglottis. This is a flap, leaf-like structure like this, okay, here. So what will happen? When we take food, the epiglottis will close the tracheal opening. When we breathe in, it will open. All this happens in fraction of second. These are all involuntary movements. So it will happen automatically. When we take food, the epiglottis will close the passage for trachea and food will enter the esophagus. When we breathe, the epiglottis will open and the air will enter the trachea and reaches the lungs. This is what happens, okay. So now we can say the other name for windpipe is, the third point, windpipe is known as trachea. Fourth point, two structures which opens into pharynx or esophagus and trachea. This is the trachea and this is esophagus. A cartilaginous flap which prevents the entry of food into the windpipe during swallowing. So when we swallow, just now I have explained, when we swallow, epiglottis is the flap which prevents the entry of food into the trachea, so that food will pass directly into the esophagus. Opening of windpipe is called as glottis. Okay, so this is, now I'll draw here epiglottis. Next you have, this is the epiglottis, is the flap like structure which got here. This is the larynx. So, and this region is the glottis. Here you have trachea. Okay, so this is the tracheal pathway. Here it divides and enters into lungs. The beginning is epiglottis. Just below the epiglottis is you have glottis. So the opening of windpipe is called as glottis. The muscular structure which regulates the opening of esophagus into the stomach is called gastroesophageal sphincter. Now we have to see, this is the chest region, that is, this is the thoracic cavity, and this is the abdominal cavity. What does abdominal cavity contain? It contains all the digestive organs and digestive glands. These two cavities are separated by a sheet of muscle called as diaphragm. Okay, this muscle separates this is the thoracic cavity and this is the abdominal cavity. This muscle is called as the diaphragm, the muscle very important for respiration. Now the esophagus extends down and reaches the abdominal cavity. Okay, the muscular sphincter, now the esophagus is the muscular tube which extends down, and here where it opens into the esophagus, this is the esophagus, this is the stomach, and where the stomach and the esophagus meets, you have got a sphincter. Sphincter means a circular muscle, ring like muscle, okay, like this, ring like muscle which opens and closes, ring like muscle which opens and closes. Okay, so this muscular sphincter means a ring like muscle which helps in opening and closing of the esophagus into the stomach. Okay, this is called as gastroesophageal sphincter. Very easy to remember, gastric region is related to stomach, gastro and esophageal sphincter. The ring of muscle or the muscular sphincter which regulates the opening of esophagus into the stomach is called gastroesophageal sphincter. So what is the important function? To prevent the regurgitation or backward flow of food into the esophagus. For example, sometimes if you take coffee, you all must have experienced, if you take too much of coffee, there will be regurgitation, that is backward flow. What happens is this, when we take too much of caffeine, this sphincter gets irritated and it will open up so that the abdominal contents will reach up to the esophagus. That's what sometimes you feel like some irritation in the throat, burning sensation or irritation in case of hyperacidity. All these things happen when the esophageal sphincter gets irritated and opens, and so that the abdominal contents moves up. So the main function is to close or regulate the opening of esophagus into the stomach. This is called gastroesophageal sphincter. Now the 8th point, stomach is located in the upper left portion of the abdominal cavity. Always divide the abdominal cavity into 9 quadrants. So where is the stomach now? It is in the upper and left side. Here you have liver, okay, this part is covered by liver. So stomach is located in the upper and left portion of the abdominal cavity. 4 major parts of the stomach are cardiac portion, that is where the esophagus opens into the stomach is the cardiac portion, and fundic region, this bulge, okay, this bulge you call as fundus of the stomach. If you eat stomach full, sometimes it will be, the food is stored till this level, otherwise this part is usually covered by the gas which is formed inside the stomach. Next you call the body of the stomach, this is the main central region. Next, this is the pyloric portion which opens into the small intestine. Okay, here it's going to be, here the stomach enters into the small intestine, it opens into the small intestine. So what are the 4 major parts of the stomach? Cardiac portion, where the esophagus enters the stomach, is the cardiac portion. Fundus, the bulged portion of the stomach, is called as the fundus. The main body of the stomach, the main central portion is called as the body of the stomach, and pyloric portion which opens into the first part of the small intestine. From here the small intestine starts, so this portion is called as the pyloric portion. This portion, okay, this portion is called as the pyloric portion. of the stomach. Now the stomach leads to small intestine. Okay, so small intestine has got the stomach leads to small intestine. This one I have, the small intestine portion I have represented it in green. It is a very coiled structure, but just for representation, explanatory purpose I have drawn it this way. So small intestine has got three regions. The C-shaped duodenum, okay, this is the C-shaped duodenum, the long coiled portion called as the jejunum, and highly coiled ileum. So the small intestine has got three regions, the C-shaped duodenum, the long coiled middle portion called as the jejunum, and highly coiled ileum. So ileum is the end of the small intestine. Small intestine has got three regions, C-shaped duodenum, long coiled middle portion jejunum, and highly coiled ileum. Ileum is the end of the small intestine. The ileum opens into large intestine. From here the large intestine starts, okay, I will draw it in red, and the ileum opens into large intestine. Okay, here it opens into large intestine. Large intestine has got four parts: cecum, colon and rectum. So cecum, colon, cecum, where the ileum opens into large intestine. Large intestine has got three parts: cecum, colon and rectum. Cecum means the small intestine which opens into large intestine. The point where it opens is called as cecum. So cecum is the beginning of large intestine. Actually it is called as the blind sac because there is no way here, like a dead end road. What you call as dead end road, here it is called as blind sac because there is no pathway here. It is completely closed. So this cecum is also called as blind sac. From the cecum, the next part is called colon. Ascending means which raises up. Okay, this is the ascending colon. Transverse means the horizontal portion, you call as transverse colon. And again it descends down, that is it comes down. This is called as descending colon. And this part is called as sigmoid colon. So the colon has got four parts: ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. This part is the sigmoid colon, and descending part opens. So this is the sigmoid colon. This descending part, sigmoid colon, opens into rectum. This is called as rectum. This is anus. One more important MCQ here: narrow finger-like tubular projection, which is a vestigial organ, arises from cecum. So here I told you, here this is the cecum. Here there is a small finger-like projection, tubular projection. This is a vestigial organ which is now it is of no use, which arises from the cecum, is called as vermiform appendix. This is called as vermiform appendix. This is a vestigial organ.